Okay, thanks, Markus. Also welcome from my side. First I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Carsten Tellmann. I work for GData Advanced Analytics, and GData is supporting this course since, many years already. And what does it mean? It means we have this additional evening event, and I'd like to invite all of you to join us later. We are going to offer it every time when we are having an invited speaker here, so if you don't have time today, maybe next time. As Markus already briefly explained, the idea behind it is we want to give you a nice and cozy atmosphere where you can freely talk to the speaker more in detail if you have detailed questions later on. If you are interested in getting in touch with people working in the antivirus industry, but also like penetration testing, and we also do red teaming, so some of my colleagues are here to enjoy the talk as well. This is a good opportunity to talk to people from the industry. So if you're interested in talking to mainly technical people, it's really great, I can recommend it. We are going to have a nice dinner and drinks, and hopefully we'll see you later. Here you see some details, but if you have further questions, don't hesitate to come to me after the talk. And now, without any further delay, I'd like to give our speaker of today a warm welcome applause.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, hopefully it works. Perfect. First of all, many thanks to Markus again for the invitation for this year's HackPra lecture. Today's talk will be about red teaming, what it is, what the difference is to penetration testing, and I will try to explain everything as part of some kind of case study. A slide about myself. As Markus mentioned, I have been a former ITS student back in 2013. I've been part of this lecture as a lecturer. I have also done the course as a student, and I'm also one of the FluxFingers members. So if you're still also looking for getting into the industry, getting into CTF, more into InfoSec, join the FluxFingers team. Right now, I'm working as a senior consultant at Context in Essen. I'm with Context now for over 6.5 years. Back in the day, started with application testing. This is like what you do here in this HackPra lecture. Then changed my field into networking, into more bespoke jobs. And right now, I'm at scenario-based testing and red team exercises. And during the talk, you will find those guys, which are at the bottom of the slide, and all of the guys identify or show a threat. What a threat is and what came down with the threat will be explained during the talk. Okay, so we have to cover some kind of theory in the beginning before we can start with the cool stuff. And this means we need to define what is a red team, what are you doing in a red team, the phases of a red team, and I will tell you some stories from the field. So stories I will tell you are all real-life examples which happened over the last years at Context, and they are not just made-up stories because they're cool. Okay, so first of all, penetration tests. So who of you has heard of penetration tests before and knows what it is? Okay, cool. That's good. Who of you knows what a red team is? Or has heard it before? Also good, perfect. Cool, so penetration tests. A penetration test usually is client-driven. So this is what you do when you develop a new application. You go to the consultancy company, you ask them, can you do a penetration test of just this application? What they usually give you is the scope, which is usually in URL, IP address, or something else. And then you get user accounts and some more specification about what the application is doing. And then you do a full penetration test. And the aim of this penetration test usually is you find all vulnerabilities within the application. And it's then up to the client to fix those vulnerabilities or say, nah, that's a risk, we don't have to fix issue XY because we don't see this as a threat. This can, for example, be if you tell them SSL version 2 is bad, and they tell you, nah, it's fine, because someone has to intercept traffic first, and that's illegal, so we don't fix it before. Penetration tests can also be divided into various from tests. One is white box test, which means you get full documentation of the application, all kind of access. You may also get access to access log, error log. So when you fuss something in the application, you can immediately say, oh yeah, there was an error because you've seen it in error logs. There are also gray box, which is more or less like a white box, but you get less information. And the black box where you just get, for example, the URL. I think this is what you still do at the HackPra lecture against that application. Red teaming. Need to change my slide a little bit. For what is a red team assessment? So a red team assessment is a full test against an organization's infrastructure. Just think about you are an attacker somewhere on the network or somewhere on the internet, and you want to get into a company, you want to steal a secret from the company. It's not always about financial gain. It could also be because a company is about to develop a new product and you want to get access to that product. It can be specification, how it's made, everything. Usually in a red team, we describe everything as TTPs, which is called tactics, techniques, and procedures. And we'll discuss later what this means and how they are built as we're doing that. And for red team, we are also not just looking at security side from a technical perspective, but also from a procedure perspective. So for example, what are employees doing when they receive a phishing email? Are they just deleting it? Are they forwarding it to the IT team? And what is the IT team doing with that? Are they analyzing the malware? If there was malware, are they analyzing the URL? Who knows? And as said, you usually start from a no-knowledge perspective. So you get a company name, that's it. That's your red team. Does it work? Okay, like that. Yeah, why should a company do it? You can do pen tests every year, but it can still be that you will miss something or you don't see a link. So for example, it might be that you have one application where you find cross-site scripting, and you find another application on which you find also cross-site scripting, and you can abuse both sides, for example, as part of cross-site request forgery in order to attack each other. This link is not seen when you do a pen test, but can be seen when you do red team exercise and you actually exploit vulnerabilities and combine the different threats you've identified and vulnerabilities you identified. And you also show what a real-life attacker or APT group in this case can do. And additionally, it's lots of fun for consultants doing that because it is not just a normal penetration test, and you do a web job every day. And yeah. Okay. So part of the red team or red team exercise is actually the red team. Those are the bad guys, which we are. We sometimes or more often have a blue team, which is also included in the exercise. Blue team is the internal SOC team or response team, IT team at the client. And what their task usually is to find you. In the best case, when you perform such an exercise, the blue team is not aware that this attack is going to happen. And only 2 or 3 people at the whole organization know about that this will happen. Those 2 or 3 people are usually based on the top level, so they are right before the client or the IT team would otherwise call the police. And at that point, they can say, stop this red team exercise, everything's fine, don't call the police. It happened before that police got called because there were some conflicts in procedures at the client, and they were unaware how to proceed once they identify a compromised workstation, for example. We also sometimes see the purple team. There's a combination of the red and blue team. This can be that we have one team performing the attack and a single consultant sitting together with the blue team, and the consultant from us is then helping the blue team to identify attacks, talk with them about the attacks, how they happened, and try to clarify. And there's also the white team, which is more boring part because this is more paper-based, and you're just talking with the client about threats, what could happen if something happens, but you're not actually doing anything good at this point. When doing a red team exercise, we always have to think about the risk and what we are doing, because it might be because you're doing it against a production environment at this point. You have to think about, oh, there's a buffer overflow. I can exploit it, or would get shell access, for example. But what's the risk with that? When exploiting buffer overflow, it's kind of likely that you will just kill the server when you're doing it wrong, because you don't know for 100% what the operating system is, what architecture it's using, which exact software version is used. So you have to think about it and then calculate, do I really have to do it, or is there another way around this? In most of the cases, there is an easier way or an other way which has a lower risk, and that's the recon way usually. And one of the things I've learned is it's not always about winning. It can be that the blue team is really, really good, and they're spotting you right after your first attack. But they usually shouldn't be able to say that you are the attacker. That's why you usually are not testing with your company's IP address. You're using VPN, or you're using, for example, Cloudflare, or something else in order to hide your real IP addresses. And also, one of the things we learned is that we have to think about what you expect does not work. And that is very likely this works in the end, because expect the unexpected. We will see it later. So a red team assessment, we usually try to divide into several parts. The first one is reconnaissance. Reconnaissance means we want to know who we are dealing with, like what is the organization doing. So we're performing OSINT. Who has heard about OSINT before? Knows what it is? One? Some more? Not? Okay, cool. Now OSINT means you're just trying to profile a company. You're using, for example, LinkedIn, Xing, Stack Overflow, all the sources you find on the internet in order to profile organization. You try to find email addresses for later attacks. Domains. Domains are really interesting for us because sometimes you see mail.company.com, sharepoint.company.com and all that, which is very useful for us. Second phase usually is staging, which means we are registering our very own domains, where we try to register domains which either look like the client, like support-clientname.com. We also try to register domains which are in the field of the company. For example, if it's a tech company, we register domains like technews.info.com or something, and then set up the whole domain and a web page. We try to get information about the company, like browser profiling. So, for example, we send in a phishing campaign. We hope that someone clicks on a phishing campaign, and then we can profile the browser, including operating system used, browser agent, or use plugins. And then we usually try to get a payload in order to compromise the workstation. When it comes to exploitation stage, this is where we get active. So we are now targeting the company. We try to breach in via the external infrastructure, phishing, watering hole attacks, and so on. We'll discuss this in more depth later. Then go on with control movement, actions on the target. This is all happening inside the network, and there's no generic approach, to be honest, because it's more like you do what you find. And during each phase, we try to have some kind of checkpoint. So it can happen you're doing a red team assessment, and you can't get in via an external vector. And that's where you usually define some kind of checkpoint. Say, so we spend 20 days getting inside from external perspective. We can't get inside, but in order to complete the red team assessment, you, for example, then have a checkpoint after staging, and you start with exploitation. This can be that you get a VPN access from the client, or you get a workstation to work with. And from there on, you do the other phases of the red team assessment. A red team exercise usually is around 60 days and upwards, so 60 days, 100 days or longer. And we spend around 20 to 30% from the time to get the initial foothold, because this is like the hardest part you can have during the red team assessment, because you need to find the needle in the haystack, so the user who actually clicked on your phishing email or which you could compromise. I have around 50 to 60% within the internal domain of the client and the corporate networks. It can be that, for example, you're not doing anything. Yes? Louder? Oh, okay, sorry. So it can be that you have to define an attack path during a red team assessment. It takes you like 4 weeks, and within 1 day, you attack the client. So this happened to me before, where we actually had to sit down 4 weeks, define the attack path, because the blue team was really good at the client, and we knew that we only have like 24 hours or less in order to attack the whole internal infrastructure before they get us, because they had good log files, a good monitoring system at that point. So we more or less, we tried to gather all kind of information from the internal domain, like the passwords, from SharePoint systems and from emails, then combine everything in a theoretical attack, and then on the day where we want to launch the attack, we just executed our attack. Rest of the red team engagement is reporting, speaking to the client. It involves lots of speaking to the client, like daily catch-up calls, telling them what we are doing. We try to get information on what they are doing. So if they have any clues that we are active at the moment, or if they have identified anything. From us, it's usually that we have one consultant in our company who's dealing with all of that. So we have a testing team and the consultant speaking to the client, because we don't want that our testers, for example, know what the blue team is doing, and the other way around, because that would just destroy the whole assessment. Okay, cool. So that was the series, just a brief overview about what a red team is, and we will now jump into the scenarios. And for the scenarios, we have a company which is called Acme, and this company is a company that just manufactures everything, so it's doing everything. And location is across the world. Our goal is just getting full access to the internal network or internal domain. Who of you knows about Windows domains? Or knows that this thing exists, like a Windows domain? Okay, that's good. And we have no limitations, so we can attack whoever we want to attack. It's often happening that you do have limitations on who you attack. For example, in most cases, the directors or board level of a company is not allowed or not included in your red team assessment, because they are too much on the top. Okay. So in phase 0, we try to identify threats by which the company this is part of what we call it a threat, or it's called threat intelligence, where we try to find the threats which are either based on the MITRE framework. I will give an example for that on the next slide. We also use information from APT groups. Does anyone know what an APT group is or heard the term before? Okay, so APT is the Advanced Persistent Threat. Advanced in this case means that the people within the APT group, they are mostly skilled people, so they actually know what they are doing and why they're doing that. Persistent means that they're using a low and slow technique or approach in order to get into the network, because they actually want to be within the network for a long time. And usually their aim is not a financial gain. It's more like it's more task-based, and sometimes it's state-sponsored. What they are doing because they want to find a secret or any other kind of information. And we have this threat. Where this threat is just lost my. So APTs are a threat. So you can actually define an APT team as a threat in the end. What also interesting is for us are attacks which happened to the organization before. So it can be, that's one of the things we usually ask our clients is, why are you doing a red team exercise? And we often hear that they have expected phishing attacks, social engineering attacks, attacks against the internal or external infrastructure, and they want to know how did they get in and how easy it is and what they can actually change. And what we usually do during scoping is we first define a scenario, which we later on do, and also exclude users and systems. So sometimes the client has a system which must not be attacked because it's too sensitive, or if we, for example, shut the system down, they couldn't work and lose money. The MITRE, so this is an example for MITRE on Windows. So everything you do is separated into, I can't read it probably, I will skip it. In different scenarios like initial access, purge escalation, all that. And for each technique, you have a threat or a threat ID in the end. And it's more like a shopping list, and you take it, put it in your basket, and then go for it. For our case study, so for our case study, we identified the following threats. We have phishing. We see this is a phisher. And we have a Trojan horse here, which is our software implant. We use physical attacks, which is just Joker, shoulder surfer, and the tailgater. And we also have threat compromise of externally facing systems, which is done by the hacker. So what I want to know for you is, what would you say is useful information you like to get about a company when you look at the threats we defined? So, So we have the threats here. What would you say is important in order to perform a phishing campaign? Yeah, perfect. Exactly. That's what we need. We need to know how does the email address look like, or first name, last name. Do you know where you would usually get this kind of information?
Sure.
Exactly. Xing is a really good resource for that. Or same for LinkedIn. But LinkedIn, you sometimes have to be friends with others because I have like, I know this person, and because I know this server, I can access that person's information, all that. So yes, that's what we need for phishing. When it comes to physical attacks does not mean you try to kill someone. It means you are trying to get into an office, for example. What would you do, or would you need to know to get into an office?
You could say, search for the delivery guys. What do they look like? When do they come to go in? And then you can try to look like one and go into.
Yep.
For example.
Exactly. Yeah. So you said that we can dress up as external supplier, for example, look who's working for that company, and then get in. Yeah. Perfect. Another one?
Carry a stack of books, look like we belong.
Yep. For the external facing systems, what would you say do you need for that? Okay, well, IP addresses, of course. So you need to know where the infrastructure from the client is and what they're using. So this is usually where we start with reconnaissance. So just like kind of boring, but can also be lots of fun for us. The aim is we want to find information about use technology. Use technology can be what kind of mail service are they using? Are they using cloud applications? Are they using AWS, Azure, anything else? Do they have a Windows domain? I've seen before that client had a Mac domain. You don't want that. You want to know about employees. What are the employees doing exactly? What the job titles are. You want to know where office locations are because you want to attack the office. And if there's a nearby office, that's awesome. And of course, the external attack surface for that, you need to know IP addresses. You can use Showdown for that. You can use SSL revocation list, which are also very good because also on an SSL revocation list, you also see internal domain names because your browser, like Firefox, Chrome, also queries SSL certificates or the name from internal SSL certificates on external certification revocation lists. In order to do reconnaissance, we need company name usually, which is in our case Acme, and we should use the VPN provider just in case, because we don't want to have our IP addresses within the client log file, because then they would immediately know that we are doing a red team exercise against them. Yeah, reconnaissance itself can then be divided into two parts. One is the passive reconnaissance, where you just collect everything you find. You never know when it will be useful. You try to get information about how the organization is structured, like who's on the top level, who's on the lower level, who's doing what. You want IP ranges mentioned before. Use technology. Antivirus is very important for us, especially when it comes to exploitation phase later on. We want to know if they use any kind of endpoint protection, if they're using Windows or something else. Rest is social networking, email harvesting, domain identification. When you're looking for domains, you are usually interested in systems which will later on give you more access. This can be a VPN endpoint, which is usually very interesting for us because then we can try to attack that specific VPN endpoint. Mail services are also good, especially when they are hosted externally, because that gives us the access to mail accounts, and usually people have passwords in their mail account somewhere. Same for SharePoint. Seen many SharePoint systems where they have no separation at all, so you can just log in as any kind of user, get access to the documents, search for password, and you'll find lots of OneNotes, for example, Word documents in which they define internal usernames. Citrix is also good. Does anyone not know Citrix? Good. It's like for remote desktop on machines. You can get access to other machines from the internet. In our case, we assume, or we later on assume, we found the mail format, which is first name dot last name at Acme top level domain, and 4,000 users in LinkedIn. We identified that the internal domain name used within the Windows domain is Acme Corp. Fun story here, we had an engagement where we did OSINT and found an entry in a malware forum or malware help forum where someone wrote a message with, hi, my laptop got infected, belongs to the company. Within the office, I have to say it was my back to the wall because there's lots of porn on my desktop all the time. And what he did was he just published the output of a well-known anti-malware tool. Within that tool output, you got the internal domain name, his company username, and all the information you usually need for a red team assessment, a successful red team assessment. Same also happens for Stack Overflow. You can't believe how many developers just ask on Stack Overflow with, oh, can you help me? It doesn't work. And they give you the full output from the configuration, including SQL passwords for external facing systems. Sometimes you spot vulnerabilities within the source code they posted. It's lots of fun to do that. And of course we identified that an office location is just nearby us, so you can just go there and attack the office. We had the passive reconnaissance. When it comes to active reconnaissance, we usually have lots of IP addresses, and we can't browse to every single IP address and to fingerprint. So we use automated tools for that, which just take a screenshot of web services. We can just hop over screenshots, say interesting or not interesting. For example, if you see an application written in PHP, that's interesting because PHP-based applications are usually fun and have lots of vulnerabilities somewhere. Also interesting for us is identification of and lack of two-factor authentication. Two-factor authentication is widespread right now. We've seen lots of applications which implement it, and for us it's getting hard. For example, when you access mail account, you get an SMS to your phone. As an attacker, you don't have the SMS, so you can't log in, which is really bad for us. Same for ports. We do targeted scanning of ports, mostly on web services, FTP, SSH, just to see where the infrastructure is, where we can get easy access. For our scenario, we assume that we collect the following information. We found Outlook web access, which is just Outlook in a browser, so you get access to email. Domains for that are mail.acme.tld with two-factor authentication. And we also found mail-test without two-factor authentication. So that's good for us. We found some PHP-based applications from 2007, so it could be interesting if you want to attack them later on. Phase 2 usually is staging, which means we want to get initial foothold into the company in order to perform more attacks against the internal domains. The common scenarios, or most common scenarios we do is spear phishing or phishing. Social engineering was physical attacks against an office. We just try to walk into an office, use hardware Trojans, for example, then get a back connection to us, and we can just get around the internal domain. Or we exploit vulnerabilities in the external infrastructure. Question for you. For social engineering, we already asked, what would you do? We would dress up, for example. What else of attacks can you think of for social engineering or when you want to get into a company via social engineering? Anyone a good idea? Everything is allowed. Just think about what wouldn't work. Okay.
You have to know, do they wear suits or do they have a backdoor you can go dressed like an external worker, stuff like that, or do batch surfing?
Yep.
Try a job interview.
That's a good point. Job interviews. Yeah, that's actually working. So make an appointment with the company and then just go, oh, I need to go to the loo and go somewhere else. So yes, works. Sorry?
Just carry a letter.
Yep, also works. Carrying a letter and to say you need to do something. Yep. Also, a yellow jacket helps with that. Yes, so other attacks you can actually do are voice phishing. So just call them up and tell them on the phone, hi, this is IT support, your laptop is doing something wrong. Please open your command line and type in this command. So we did it for a client. This client was based in Africa. We don't have an African accent. But we said, oh yeah, your laptop is sending emails. Can you please press Windows R, type in CMD, and give us the following information? And they did it. So it also works, voice phishing. USB drop is also a common technique where you just go to the parking lots, drop some USB sticks, and hope that they plug it into the company laptop. Tailgating, this is a technique we will talk later on again. Well, of course, wireless attacks. So when they have security badges, you can try to analyze those. It's very uncommon that you do it because there are easier ways to get in. So phishing. For phishing, we have 2 or 3 steps usually. The first step is we try to profile the client and the operating system, what they're using. Like, are they using Windows? Are they using Macs? Are they using Internet Explorer, Firefox, Chrome? Do they have plugins enabled? So it can be that you see that they have Java enabled, Flash, Silverlight, ActiveX, Active, all this. We also want to know if there are any user out of office at the moment, because that's interesting for us for the next attacks. Because, for example, when we send in our payload, it might be that the payload is picked up by the mail server. But if we get back an out-of-office reply from that user, we know that the payload actually went through into the inbox. Because when it's marked as junk, you don't get an out-of-office reply. Prerequisites for this kind of attack are, of course, email addresses. You need a system to send emails. I think the current state of the art tool for that is GoFish. I think what most use. You, of course, need an email delivery system with a good reputation. So you can't just send phishing emails from your IP address, because after like 20, 50, 100 emails, you will probably get blacklisted by someone. But there are luckily external providers like SendGrid, SendMail, for example, which have a really good reputation. You can just use them in order to send out phishing campaigns. And of course, you need some kind of idea for phishing campaign. So the phishing campaign should be targeted or relevant to the organization you are attacking for or attacking. Question for you: who has seen a phishing email before? That's good. Who of you got a targeted phishing email? Okay. How was it targeted for you? Sorry?
My name.
It was your name was mentioned, is it? Okay, that's targeted. Was there any kind of reference to an existing account, or was it really targeted? Like, was the content targeted?
Yes, and supposed invitation to a security conference.
Okay, that's a really targeted phishing email. Yeah. So this is what we will look for the next case. What have you done with that email?
Deleted it.
Okay, so you deleted it. You didn't click on it from a VM, nothing.
No.
That's good. Okay. For our case study, we of course need an infrastructure to the whole project. In this case, we have us here. We have a red team server on which we have GoFish and Strike. We will talk about Strike later. Running. We have a mail server, which is in this case SendMail, for example. SendMail sends all our phishing emails to the internal Army Corporation mail server. That one sends it over to all the clients. We have here an external facing server, which is usually CloudFront, Cloudflare, something like that, so something we can easily change to get a new IP address or a new URL. So they click here, everything gets redirected to another server, because we have seen in the past that it happened too often that for some reason Cloudflare leaked our actual IP. So we have another hop point here, and then it goes back to our red team server. Yeah, so that was the infrastructure. When it comes to the phishing, I hope you can see it. So this one is the German one. This is a really common phishing email we just sent out. It just says, oops, sorry, your package had a delay. We couldn't deliver it to you. Please click here in order to change everything. And if you are not responding within 24 hours, we will send it back on your cost. And we usually have a very good success rate with this kind of email. And people are clicking because it's so generous, right? For our case, we will assume that we send it out to some marketing office assistant and salespeople because this is something they would also expect to get in the inbox because it's likely that they get packages. From the replies we got, we assume that we got an out-of-office email back within the header of the mail. So mail headers are really interesting because you see how they get redirected internally. So you might get information about internal system names. You get information about antivirus scanner. So in this case, we assume you see the header X scanned by anti-malware. And the X scanner is the you shall not pass AV. And we also got 17 clicks from users, and we could say that they're using Windows 10, latest version, and Internet Explorer as default browser when clicking on URLs. For the you shall not pass AV, we look up on the internet and we see this one can be used on mail servers or servers in general, and also on client systems. So it's kind of likely that they use the same product on the server side and client side later on. And we know the AV scans the memory for malicious payloads and blocks all attachments sent from external domains, and also tries to download or access all download links within an email. And if it's downloadable content, it will just block everything. So if we would now send in a phishing email with our attachment, it would just get blocked and we wouldn't get in. Second part for the phishing campaign, it's usually more targeted, where we try to send email to specific people in order to get, for example, their credentials or send in our payload. I said before, sending in an email just with our payload doesn't work because it will be blocked in our case. But we will send in another email in order to get information like username and passwords. So another common scenario we use for clients is we send an email just saying, hi, we are the internal IT team. We have just changed your Outlook profile picture to that blurred one. If you want to change it, just click on the blank links here. And then once you click, they will get redirected to an Outlook web access where they can just put in their user credentials. Once done, we have their credentials and they get forwarded to the actual system. Who of you thinks this works? Yeah. Who of you thinks that people also submit their two-factor authorization token here? Yeah. Unfortunately, it's really working like that. We've seen it lots of times that people are just putting in their credentials, they don't get it, and just doing it. We have also seen it like to do it 2 or 3 times in a row because they are not getting logged in. Even though we usually redirect them to the actual application, they just go back to the last URL and try it again. Anyways. Okay, we assume we got 2 sets of credentials from a marketing assistant and an office assistant. And we could successfully use those credentials against the exposed Outlook web mailer with no two-factor enabled. which means we got access to the external Outlook. We can actually use those credentials for our next phishing campaign because external attachments are blocked, but not internal attachments. So what we later on do is we try to find an interesting conversation within those email accounts and then just hijack the thread, the email thread, and send in emails with files, attachments, download links, all that in order to compromise internal user accounts. But before we're doing that, we have one more scenario for social engineering. As I said before, we have tailgating, wireless attacks, USB drops, and all that. And the aim of it usually is that we get access to the office and install a hardware implant, for example. And in order to do that, we need to know the office location, which we know in this case is just nearby, and we need to set up a hardware implant. A hardware implant can be everything. It can be a mini computer, it can just be a Raspberry Pi, which connects back via GSM, whatever you want. In this case, we have changed our infrastructure here. So we will walk in the office, place our implant here. The implant will connect back to another Cloudflare and Cloudflare, whatever IP address, then communicates back to the server, and we will go on that server and try to access some kind of command and control server. And you will notice we also now have here VPN. So when we logged into the Outlook webmailer, we of course use the VPN and not our company IP address because that would be stupid. Tailgating. Who of you heard about tailgating before and knows what it is? Okay, cool. So tailgating just means follow someone else and get inside. We also always ask you, or I already asked you about attack scenarios. We said we're dressing up as someone else. That actually works. So we once did a social engineering attack against a client where we found on the company's website or on a third party's website the information that, oh yeah, we are also window cleaning for this company. So what we did is we just dressed up as window cleaner, walked in there in the morning, was in a blue suit, had a bucket with us. We went to the reception, said we are company XY, we want to clean windows today. And the nice lady at the reception just asked, do you want access to one floor or all floors? And we were like, yes, all floors, including server room. No, so we didn't get access to server room, but to all floors in the building, which was nice for us. We could just walk around and plan some software, some hardware implants there. Another story which worked was we observed a client on one day and saw that they are working in a shared building and they had no canteen. So everyone at lunchtime, they had to go outside the office. They were walking out in like groups of 10, 15 people. Most of them actually wear their security badges. So security badges usually used to open doors inside the company. And we saw that, oh, it's nice. They're wearing it. So we took a photo camera with us, took some photos of the badges, went back to the office and recreated a visual copy of the tag. So we look like them. And of course, if we would use again one of the scanner, it wouldn't work. But the visual copy was really good. Next day, lunchtime again, we just waited till they get back in. Walked behind them in a group of, I think it was 3 or 4, and just pretended that we should be there. And we went inside the elevator, got up to level 4, and first one in the group opened the door. Everyone was looking at us, seeing our badges, and was like, yeah, must be fine. And we walked just in there with them. And once we were inside, we walked straight into the kitchen of the client. And luckily, they had mugs there with the company name branded on it. And so it looked so legit. And we used that mug to get to the other levels in the shared building and just knocked on the doors saying, we got the cup. And everyone was like, oh yeah, we let them in. We got everywhere in that building. It was really fun. And yeah, same story for our tailgating story. So we assume we took photos of the badge, followed them inside, and placed our hardware implant. Unfortunately, our hardware implant got found this time after a few days by someone because it was just under a desk and someone cleaned there, and we could no longer use it for this assessment. So what we could have done is we walk in again, but it's very likely that once you did a physical assessment against a company that they will do something on a security level against this. Okay, last one for this. Brute forcing. Aim usually is gain access to whatever application or user accounts by using common passwords or passwords you know are used by a company. Prerequisites here for are email addresses, for example, an email system without two-factor authentication, and a VPN service. What would you think are common passwords used in a corporate environment?
Company name.
Company name, yes. Just a company name or?
Some numbers.
Yep, okay. So,
Days when it's founded, by the way.
sorry?
The date when it was founded.
Yep. So company name, some letter or some numbers behind it is actually one of the things that I've seen so many times that company name 2019 or 18 exclamation mark, that works. You will find on 1,000 accounts there's 1-2% which are actually using this as a password. Same is for summer 2019, winter 2019, everything. All of those passwords work and are used by employees at some point. For brute forcing, once been for a client where we dumped the whole Active Directory and user accounts, and when we try to crack passwords, we notice that, when we try to passwords, we usually have the rules in HashKit, for example, and our last character usually is an exclamation mark. And for this client, we literally got no hit for an exclamation mark as the last character. So we spoke with our client about it, and it was like, yep, that's right. And he told us, try another character. Try it around. And in the end, we found out that an asterisk is used as the last character. And we asked, like, why is everyone using asterisk as last character? And it was like, that's simple. Our initial password has an asterisk at the end. And everyone or all the employees thought that this is needed for some reason instead of the exclamation mark. And after knowing that, we actually modified our HashKit rules and got like 35% correct from passwords, just with that knowledge. Yeah. Cool. Yeah, just the infrastructure again. I had it. For our attack scenario, we actually use ACME 2019, start 1 to 3 as passwords. Once submitted, so once we submit a username and a password, we should usually change our IP address, because if you have 100 failed logins from the same IP address, it's likely to get picked up by the blue team, at least if they're somehow good or at least monitor something like that. So we are more or less simulating a botnet in this case, where we have different IP addresses and they usually don't or can't correlate this kind of attack. And in order to identify if the password is correct or wrong, we usually just observe the status code of the application. For us, we got 14 user accounts across various departments with those passwords. So summed up, we got email access to various accounts, which is good for our next attacks. We gained an initial foothold to the office network via our hardware implant, which was then spotted, so we can't use it anymore. And we still know that they are likely using the use shall not pass AV, which is signature-based, scans the memory for payloads, blocks all external attachments. more interesting part is exploitation then. Where the overall aim of this phase is to successfully compromise a computer within the internal domain network. And we of course still need a test system with Windows 10 and the antivirus installed. Don't know if someone has seen the recent news. A threat actor was found by Kaspersky because they didn't disable the automatic malware submission system on their computers. And so during the development process of their very own implant, they just got spotted as a new APT group. So yeah, always think about that and don't automatically submit your samples to your antivirus supplier or VirusTotal, for example. We need a command control server for our implant to work and to establish the connection. Of course, once again, we want to hide our IP addresses, so we need more servers and the email chain within one of the compromised mailboxes in order to get our implant out. Infrastructure is more or less the same, just renewed IP addresses for all external facing servers so that the response team can't correlate our previous attacks to the next attacks. For our payload, we do have showstoppers on corporate networks. So in corporate network, you usually have app blocker active. You likely have endpoint protection systems, antivirus solutions, Windows firewall. Sometimes they do that on local firewalling. More likely is that they have a proxy servers in the company which blocks everything. And sometimes you also see that they have Windows Defender active. And the problem is when you attack a company, you need to find a way to get information about their configuration without having access to the configuration. So it's lots of testing, sending implants in, for example, or your very first implant is good enough to bypass like everything in the first case. For our payload, we need to execute a program in the context of a user on a workstation. And for that, we usually have a carrier and a payload. In this case, the carrier is cmd.exe and the payload is calc. In order to tackle the showstoppers, we need to check what the showstoppers are restricting. So it's either restricting the carrier or the payload. And like kind of exercise, who knows what app blocker is? Cool. Is it restricting the carrier or the payload?
Carrier.
The carrier, exactly. Windows Defender, probably known by most. Who knows what Windows Defender is restricting? Nothing. That's right. No. Okay, let's ask what should it? Sorry?
Malware running.
Yeah, so the carrier. Windows Firewall is blocking the payload or the carrier again? Well, in first instance, it blocks your payload because the payload is what's communicating, right? It can, but yes, it can. But usually is the payload because you don't have a single application that communicates automatically back to your IPCNC, for example. Yeah, okay, so shown that. Yeah, that's Windows Firewall, of course, restricts the carrier. Yeah. Device guard, does anyone know device guard, what it is? I heard a yes somewhere. Okay, yeah, device guard is also for restricting carriers, so it just restricts applications. We have AMSI, which is like an interface between your program, like PowerShell, for example, and your antivirus, so it restricts the payload. We have third-party antivirus solutions. Usually restricts the payload, either on a signature-based or on a behavior-based. We have the endpoint protection and response solutions, which also restricts the payload on more or less same. When we design a payload, we usually want to get some kind of back connection, which gives us interactive access to the workstation. Sometimes it's enough to add a sleep of 5 seconds or count to 3 million in order to bypass antivirus protection and behavior control. Sometimes you have to hook all syscalls or you have to hook all syscalls hooked by the antivirus solution, so hook before you get hooked. So this can take days, weeks. So it can be like everything. One of the main principles we have is we should never write to disk, because in that case it's very likely that your payload gets detected, either by the antivirus or by endpoint protection system. So we want in-memory execution. In-memory execution can be done in various ways. Probably the most commonly used one is dynamically allocating memory. We can use function pointer, we can use the text segment, or an AVX hunter. This is talking about this is like a talk on its own. It's a massive topic. If you want this, we have a blog article about this. We get some introduction to Windows and how to execute shellcode in memory and all the different techniques. One of the things I like to talk about is the most generic method, which is just allocating memory. So what we do is we have shellcode, we define it in a variable, we use system calls when API to allocate some memory and then point everything to that part, to the heap, and then we just execute it. So kind of simple. Oops. The pros of this method are it's working on more or less every system, Windows system, because that's the intended way how you execute stuff. It's later on used when it comes to bypassing antivirus or endpoint protection, because we can also allocate memory and we can rewrite it all the time. The cons of it are this function is mostly hooked by antiviruses or endpoint protection systems, so you have to work around that, which means if you call a function which is protected by the antivirus, so likely just flag or say, oh, nope, something happened here, we'll block it, and you get caught. For software implants, there are various software implants. Some are commercially used, some are open source, like Metasploit is open source, Empire is open source, CovidStrike is free trial for 30 days, and after that you can pay for it on the commercial side. We usually use CovidStrike because it's like the state-of-the-art tool at the moment. Gives you a good overview on how to extend the payload and work around it, but we'll see it later on again. CovidStrike also gives you other options like a C2 profile, which helps you to change the way your traffic gets sent via HTTP, for example. So you can say there's a GET request, there's a POST request, that it should like usual traffic to Amazon, for example, or Gmail, or something else. Also gives you the option to get output formats for different vectors like binary, PowerShell, raw, which is the bytes. Yeah, this CovidStrike how it looks like. So it looks like a clicky bunty tool. We can just see Intel IP addresses, the user who executed it, machine names, and all that, and then you can say, oh yeah, use shell, who am I, gives you information, all that. So it's really straightforward to use, but it's actually also used by threat actors. Cool. when looking at the use shall not pass AV, we found that if we place our Cobalt Strike payload directly into a variable, it just gets flagged because it scans memory. So we need an idea on how we can work around that. The idea could be we generate raw shellcode, we encrypt it via XOR, and then place the XOR code within our functionality. Because the encrypted shellcode is just garbage for the antivirus. And then later on we decrypt it char by char. When it comes to rewriting or using the shellcode, it also matters on how you implement it. So my previous example was written in C. This one is C#. The difference, or one of the differences between them is C# is managed code and C is unmanaged code. It really matters because the antivirus and endpoint protection system, they have different techniques if it's managed or unmanaged code and how they're processing it. And we found it way easier to bypass when using C#, for example. And even with C#, we can use C functions. So in this case, we're using interop in order to use the previously shown C functions. What we are doing here is we have, you can somewhat see it, we have our shellcode here. We have a password or an XOR encryption key here. We put everything into the memory, and then we loop over our shellcode char by char and decrypt it. The reason why we are not doing it at once is kind of simple, because when you have it once, it gets more or less placed somewhere as a whole. So the memory scanner can easily find you again. And if you do it char by char, they only see one char during the access phase. Cool. C2 profiles, we use them in order to look like legitimate traffic. One of the C2 profiles we can use is, for example, Gmail. Before April 2018, it was possible to use Google App Spot. Who has used Google App Spot before and knows what it is? No one. Okay, cool, let me explain. So Google App Spot is some kind of cloud computing. So you can write a Python program and go to Google App Spot, say, please run this for me. And one of the unintended functionality was that you can write a Python code which just forwards all incoming traffic to another source, to another destination. And on the good side was you can point your implant to google.com, for example, and within the host header, you define your very own AppSpot URL, which is given once you create an AppSpot project, which means when someone from the SOC team looks at the traffic, they see IP address of google.com, Gmail, and only if they would intercept SSL, they would see within the host header that there is a malicious AppSpot URL. Okay, so we're now assuming that we got a software implant ready to send out. How would you send in a malicious file to someone else? Would you just attach an exe to your emails and ask them to run it, or who thinks that it would work just sending it? Okay. Yep.
Yeah, you could be pretending to be applying for job application, just job application,
Mm-hmm.
then use a macro in a Word document to download the payload.
Yep. So word macros, Excel macros, that's still a common technique, even though it's getting more and more protected nowadays. It's still working in some cases. Yep.
You could try to write them a kind of phishing mail that looks like it's from the IT department and say, hey, you need to update this software immediately. Here's the file, please install it.
Also actually works, yes.
This is the IT department.
Yep, good, perfect. So to do, yeah, I said sending in just an exe file, that's very suspicious. So one of the things we recently used was we sent in a zip file. And within the zip file, there were 4 other files. 3 of them were file attribute hidden, so you couldn't see them when you extract the zip file. The first file was a batch file under Windows, which just executes command line by line. And we changed the name of the bat file to PNG. That bat file just opens another image and then starts our exe file, for example. And we also place a shortcut to system32 cmd-exe, and then we pipe in the content of our legit PNG in the end. So you can't see it that good, but that's the shortcut. And the only difference between the actual PNG and our shortcut is that there is a small error on the left corner. And this also actually works. So people clicking, and the good is we've seen various antivirus and endpoint protection systems. We don't pick this up if you do it like that. But what we have seen is that lots of mail gateways block the shortcuts as a file type. So even though when you protect it with a zip archive with a password, it's getting spotted. Yes, mentioned before, we put everything in a zip file, send it in to the company. Yeah, so as I said before, we first send the email to our out-of-office users because we want to know if that mail gets picked up by the antivirus scanner on the systems or not. In this case, we got the same out-of-office reply like in our first phishing campaign, so we know it got delivered to the inbox, so we can reuse it again. Yep, and we got 3 implants back, and we can now proceed on the next stage within the internal network. Control movement. The aim of this usually is learn. Just learn how is IT working, what kind of tools are they using, is it RDP, is it PowerShell, is it RDP, PowerShell, or anything else. What we also try to find is who are we, where do we have access. We usually use Bloodhound. Then we'll talk about it later. Who heard about Bloodhound before? You heard about it. Cool. Yes, we come back to that later. We look for Sharepoint wiki because there's lots of useful information in this. Version control systems like GitLab, SVN, Artifactory server, Jenkins server, proxy servers. It's always something we are interested in. And also, we look again for showstoppers. So it can be that you compromised a machine and you got access, but it doesn't mean that you're not getting detected later on. So we've seen endpoint protection systems which were built in order to monitor you. So they allow you to compromise a single machine, but they will stop you once you try to escalate away from the machine. The reason behind that is that they want to learn what you're doing, what your threats are, and how you are behaving on that machine, because then they can more easily identify what your aim is, what you want to get, and how you came in. Yeah, so this is more for looking like how admins are working in the network. Are they using remote desktop protocol to connect to other servers, PowerShell, PSExec, Python, Perl. So I've seen companies who use Windows domain, use WinSSH, or using Python and Perl to deploy software to the machines. Also, in general, interesting how is software installed. Most companies have some kind of agent installed, which is used in order to deploy software on a daily basis, weekly basis, or something else. Can be interesting for us because it means they have to log into your desktop system or to the workstation. And it might be that in the moment when they connect to you, you might be able to get the password out of the memory. And that's very useful when you have an account which can install software on other computers, because usually those accounts have domain administrator-like privileges, so you can more or less do everything, connect to everywhere. And also interesting is the working out of the compromiser code. So for example, when you try to get a huge file from the system in the middle of the night, that's probably getting detected by the response team because they see a spike in the network log. So you should try to do this while the employee is using the machine. As mentioned before, one of the tools we use on a domain is Bloodhound. Bloodhound is used for collecting information about your Active Directory, so about the Windows domain, including user groups, memberships, access rights for users, active sessions, and I haven't seen yet that it got spotted by the response team in the internal network, even though it's doing lots of LDAP queries. So it usually, to give you an overview, it usually runs like 1 or 2 hours, and all the time it's doing an LDAP query. So in the network logs, you can see there's a big spike at that point. And the results you get from Bloodhound can then be loaded in a graph tool, for example. We have an example here for S. Müller. So we're saying we compromised S. Müller at Acme Corp, and we want to be domain admin. And what Bloodhound can tell you is, this is the S. Müller account. He's a member of this group, and this group, everyone in this group, it has administrator rights to this system and to this system. And on both systems, there's user logged in. And that user is part of this group. This group has, again, admin privileges to this box. And on this box is someone logged in who's the domain administrator. So when conducting such an assessment, Bloodhound is a really good resource because you don't have to just poke around. You can just go in there, say, I want the path from here to there, and then try to follow the path. One of the negative sides of Bloodhound is that you sometimes get false positives. So Bloodhound is actually showing you attack paths which will not work. Okay, for now, we got 2 attack paths in order to be a domain administrator. One is we do a local privilege escalation, dump memory of a compromised system. So with that we get the plaintext password, then use RDP, hop on the next server, and again and again. And another attack we do is Kerberos Attack. What it is, we'll talk later. Question here, when it comes to attacks, would you do an active or passive attack usually in a network? Who's for an active attack against people or other employees?
Explain active.
Oh, okay, sorry. Active means we are, for example, performing a man-in-the-middle attack against others within the network. And passive attack could be we are just sniffing or looking around with the user privileges we got. So I would also do, So I wouldn't do an active attack, so like man-in-the-middle attacks or ARP spoofing attacks in network, because that's too likely to get picked up, especially when you're messing around with an ARP table in the company. Oops. Yep. So the comp movement vectors, which we've seen over the years, hard-coded credentials and scripts. I've seen lots of times where you go on an SMB share, there's a PowerShell script, Pod script, whatever, and there are hard-coded credentials for service accounts inside. It's so common. Same is for netlogon server. So netlogon is used once you log into your workstation. Your computer calls a netlogon server and looks there for any kind of script files. If there's a script file, just execute it. And sometimes there are credentials inside that. Same for administrative interfaces. Within the domain network, there's always one server having no credentials or default credentials, which can easily be compromised in order to get access. Backup solutions with or without passwords. Interesting. Once been on client engagement, we found an SMB share on which they back up the domain controller. So we created a Veeam backup of the domain controller. We just gathered that file and dumped all the credentials out of it, and then corrected the password. So that was a really easy win. Another problem in domain networks is excessive usage of domain administrators. So as an IT admin, you usually have 2 accounts. One is your domain admin account, which should only be used on domain controller. And you also have your personal account, which has, for example, access to a client's workstation, to another employee's workstation, or to maintain it, give help, support, or whatever. But we've seen too often that IT is using their domain admin privileges on employee systems, because in that case, everything just works for them. They can do everything, but it's really a bad habit. WPAD man the middle tags, it's an active attack, but also works. So WPAD is, on Windows, you can specify in your Intex Pro, for example, that you want to use a proxy server on your network. And you have the option to say, look for the proxy server yourself. And what your workstation is doing then is just broadcasting a message across the whole network saying, who's the proxy server? And everyone can say, I'm the proxy server now. And then all the traffic from one workstation gets over the proxy server, and you can sniff credentials, if they're plain text, or NTLM hashes, and use them in other attacks. Local privilege escalation, also come Vector and Kerberos, which we'll see later. Cool. In our case, we have the antivirus service, which is running with an unquoted service path and anti-asserted system rights, which are the highest privileges on a Windows system, on this path. Who sees an error or knows about unquoted service paths and attacks? Yes. What's the?
Ask if I just see it, or
Yeah. Do you see the error or the problem with that?
yeah, between software and updater.
Yeah, exactly. What's the problem there?
The white space, basically.
Okay. What does it mean?
So everything left from the white space is interpreted in, but only until this up to this point, and I can interfere with this issue by placing my own stuff right over the white space.
Exactly.
Explain like that.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, so an arbitrary exit can be placed under this path here, because that's how Windows works. If you use an unquoted service path for services, it just tries to go to the path and says, oh yeah, if there's a file called software.exe, I will execute it, because it's legit, yes.
Why isn't it already a problem with program?
It is, but writing to cprogram.exe is very unlikely. But yes, it's also a problem at this point, that's correct. But in this case, we were able to write into usual path directory. So what you would usually do is place a random exe, for example, add a new local administrator, then use Mimicards. So Mimicards is a common tool to dump clear text credentials out of the memory. Works in some cases, not all cases. So has anyone heard of Mimicards before? Okay, so would you say it's a good thing to do on a workstation to run Mimicards?
Not anymore.
Sorry?
Not anymore.
Not anymore. It still works on a Windows 10.
I mean, if you customize it, you can still do it, but
Yes.
vanilla version is
Yeah.
most of the time.
Exactly. Yeah.
What I've seen.
Exactly. As mentioned, Mimicards itself is picked up by AV's endpoint protection system. Same is for how Mimicards works. So it tries to dump the LSAS process, and usually this process is heavily monitored, and it's kind of unlikely that this kind of attack gets not detected, but can be the case. In our case, we used gathered credentials from the memory to establish an RDP connection with our software plans, then jump from the next box to the next box. Did our privilege escalation once again on each server, and then got domain administrator. coming back to Kerberos Attack. Who of you have heard of Kerberos Attack before? You. That's good. Yeah. So to explain it in a nutshell, so Kerberos Attack is abusing a problem in the Kerberos protocol in Windows and cannot be fixed. It works like this. So you have a domain user, and every domain user is able to request a TGT, a ticket granting ticket. And that TGT can then be used to request a TGS, which is for service accounts on the domain and for any service on the domain. And part of the TGS is encrypted with the password of the target service. Does anyone see a problem with that? Okay. So the problem with that is you as a user can ask, can I have a TGS for this service account? What you get back is a ticket. The ticket is encrypted with the password hash or the password of the service. And what you can do is you can just try to decrypt everything and get the plain text password. And usually those service accounts have higher domain privileges because they are service accounts. There's a really good write-up on that and on the interns from Harmjoy. It's worth reading it. Okay, more or less the last phase. It's about persistence and egress. What we usually want to do is we want to finish up with our red team exercise, but it might be that we want to be there for a longer time, like 3 months later, I want to do it again. I want to see if the blue team actually picked up our attack, maybe after 3 months, maybe they do, maybe never. And in order to do that, we need to somehow get persistence on our work session. So common ways to do that is scheduling a task, placing ourselves or software implant in a startup directory, or replace DLL files or common tools used on the workstation. And also one of the things you usually want to do in an red team exercise is you want to get compromised data out, like dump all domain users, get that information out. We usually try to do this via different ways. One is HTTP, HTTPS, because that's most common, and you mostly have a proxy server set up in the network which allows you to do that. DNS, seen it before that no HTTP, HTTPS traffic or any other traffic is allowed, but there's a name server somewhere in the network which allows DNS to everywhere, even to external domains. And you can use that in order to exfiltrate data. It's really slow, but it works. Same for SCP and using email in order to send out files. Last part is also the most boring one, at least for the consultant doing the job, is post-red team actions. Usually the client wants a report from you. And this means you have to draw some kind of attack path, like what worked, what didn't work. They expect from us a timeline of the attack, which can be the most frustrating part if you have forgotten to do it, why you did the red team, and you have to go through all your log files and find out what you did and when. You usually need to tell them which accounts you accessed, performed attacks, who clicked on phishing links and when. Same for implants, when they came up first, when was the last connection, and any kind of identifiers that they can maybe find in the network. And you need to tell them what you did on the targets, because red team exercise also means that they want to have a benefit afterwards for the blue team or SOC team. And in most cases, they want them to analyze the attack once we are done and finished up the attack. Yep, I think more or less last slide. Once done, update your very own toolkit with your new techniques, because no red team is like this. There's no straightforward. You always learn something new, and every time you have to spend lots of days just on looking at your old nodes, changing them, change code, update your toolkit, and with your new procedures. Yeah, that's it. Sorry, it took me too long. Any questions for this? No question. Oh, yes, one question. No, we didn't. What we did with that client actually was we went inside, went to one of the bathrooms, we placed a sign out of order, and then we went around the company and collected stuff like laptops, we grabbed pictures from the wall and all that and placed it within the bathroom. For now, but we did never clean the windows. Yep.
At the beginning, you sketched your infrastructure for sending phishing emails.
Yep.
And in the first step, you're using your own external mail server. So.
It's not all. It's let's see it. The mail server shown is SendGrid usually. So it's not our mail. So the mail server we are using.
It's not part of the company.
It's not ours.
So,
no, yeah.
Do you also spoof sender addresses that it looks like they are coming?
No, we are not. No, we are not.
Yeah. Later when you have control
we sometimes do, but from the experience we had, is that it usually gets blocked nowadays.
Yes.
Because of the SPF record. So most double check it and it doesn't work anymore. In the past, yes, we did. But I think latest ones, I think in the last 2-3 years, we didn't use that anymore.
So maybe one question.
Yep.
So we had a problem regarding disguising as existing third companies when red teaming. So how do you circumvent that?
Good point. We try to avoid to host, for example, websites from DHL, as a packaging service. Yes, so we don't do that. For webmail, like the one I showed for Outlook Web Access, we just use it. But we try to not use domain names from other companies. We also had, doing another red team, we had the problem that we used the company name of our target, and it was the company name -support. What we didn't knew was that the company name is a trademark, and we got sued on this. Even though we had the access to do that, or we had the allowance, but the legal department, they gave the handling to another company, and they were not aware of that. And they usually, that company sues just like everyone and try to get money. They get like 10-20% out of it, and they're happy, and that's their business. So yes, we have seen that before. Cool, perfect. Thank you very much.